So there was this boot camper. Her name's Olivia. She's pretty awesome. Wanted to get together with me because she was starting to go through the program. She's interviewing, and here's the situation. She's a senior project manager, and this global organization, was looking for a senior IT PM. She had already met with an external recruiter who put her in front of the internal recruiter hirer and CIO, I believe. And what happened was she went to this interview. She didn't feel like her stories were sharp. She didn't feel like she scored super well. She also was a bit confused because there was a disconnect between what the what the executive recruiter told her she was interviewing for, and what the hirer and CIO thought they were interviewing her for. There was a disconnect. It was a hot mess. And then to make matters worse, she wasn't sure which stories to tell, and this was exacerbated by the fact that they were asking her these random questions that weren't completely dialed up, didn't give her enough specifics about where she should take her story, and she wasn't really sure. And she said they were asking her kind of random, behavioral questions, and even just some random questions like, well, how would you handle a backlog? A backlog of what, kind of things. And so she and I got together, and I said, okay, send me. So when I do these one-on-one sessions, what I have the folks do is I have them send me their resume. If they're getting help from me for interviewing prep, I have them send me the company, send me the job description, send me any storyboards. If they have sample answers that they've worked on, or notes, or anything that they want, they send me their criteria, what's important to them, and so on. So I looked at what the JD said, and the things that I want you to notice over these next couple of pages are how I look at a JD. You could call this the Andy heat map if you want. So when I look at a JD, I see it differently than other people, right? Some people, they look at the song sheet, all they see are the notes. I hear the music, and I know where to look, and I want to show you, before we get into the here's how for Olivia, what is it that's important when you look at a JD. So they need a project manager, and they'd like 10 years. It's IT enterprise apps. It's HR primary function with a SaaS. Okay, those are all unique components. Why do I want to know that? Because those are going to be elements she's going to have to address in her storytelling. It's a global, they're looking for somebody who has global experience in high-tech companies. So have you worked for an international organization? Have you implemented international solutions? And have you done that for technology organizations? Okay, right now, all we're doing is what? Hey, we're organizing, right? We're inventorying. What do we got to cover here? Now, when you see things like demonstrable results in delivering modern blah, 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 this is the employer version of word vomit that means nothing. But I noticed they put the word adoption in there, which means it's very important to them that if they're implementing an IT solution, that they want people to use it. I mean, they could have just said user adoption. That's all I would need to know in a JD. Again, demonstrable experience leading. Customization. Okay, so you're going to need to be able to customize the solution, and you're going to need to be able to integrate it. Okay, so far so good. Nothing out of the ordinary. Knowledge of IT compliance. Okay, that's a component I need working knowledge of. Data security, cybersecurity, privacy, and Chinese. They called out Chinese because the headquarters is in China. Now, that's a preferred but not required. But that the organization would love to have that. They cannot require that because what? That's discrimination, right? And then bachelor's degree, which I glossed over. Project managed overseas HCM, human capital management. Okay, so now here's what you're going to be doing. All right. Agile, standardized, agile, waterfall. That's what that's code for. That's what we want you to be able to do. That's the approach you want you to take. SaaS adoption, right? I get it. Global rollout, fine. Same thing, right? It's international across different regions within the world. analytics and metrics. So I need to know that you come with strong monitoring ability to make sure that the project is on time, on budget. You know what earned versus burned is. You know how to track it, adjust, and so on. So you have to have dashboarding skills. You have to know what to look for and how to make adjustments. All right, great. And continuous improvement. All right, so once you get it up and running, you need to be able to monitor it, right? Okay, so now let's strip it all out. What does it look like? Give me 10. Give me 10 as a PM. HR, HCM functions, cool. High-tech companies, have you worked for? Have you been global? Do you understand new implementations of HCM solutions from scratch? This is what they were doing. All right, so they were implementing a solution from nothing. Ground floor stuff. SaaS adoption, adoptions code for change management. What are the methods you've used? Continuous improvement. Have you done maintenance? Okay, well, she had 9 years of total work experience. Total. Not all of that was PMing, but let's be generous and give her 7. All right, so I'm a little light. I understand human capital management because I do that at my current technology company, but I've not implemented it. I just maintain the system. Okay, so that's not great, but it's not terrible because you got working knowledge of the functions. High-tech companies, I would call them close enough. Global, not hugely large, but she is Asian. So, and she understands the culture. And I wasn't even sure, she might even probably speak the language. She has done new implementations, but not HCM like they wanted. There were some other things that were loosely connected. SaaS adoption, so she understands how to help implement it and get it, ingrained with the user base, but not on a large scale. Her methodology was very, very good, and she had continuous improvement because she currently was maintaining her company's HCM system, so that like little maintenance, bugs, little fixes, and those kind of things. So we had some gaps here. Now, there were years of experience gap, there was the size of project gap, there was the impact level. Now, I want y'all to stare at that for a second. I said to her, this job should be a layup for you. Because on paper, I would take that list all day long. Because she's got the elements of what I need. Now it comes down to what? Storytelling. Right? Paperwork is there. That's why she's sitting in front of them. That's why even though she didn't do well, they invited her back for another round. Right? So when you look at, Andy, am I close enough? Should I submit? Hey, Andy, I thought I was right there, but I didn't get the job. Your storytelling fell apart. If anybody has this background against that job description, the way she has it, that job should be yours. You should be counting the new payday, right? Except that let's not be flip about it, right? You got to go through the interviews and you got to score well. You got to connect with them. You got to make sure that your stories are in alignment with their problems, right? So we still got some work here to do, even though I think Olivia is a star. All right, so she said, Andy, I want you to help me address the gaps. I need some help with the storytelling. I'd like to tighten my responses because I want to make sure I stay on track. I don't want to fall prey to wandering into areas that are not really important. Maybe we can touch on the tell me about yourself. They ask me these random questions. I'm not sure, how to siphon it down to know exactly what they're looking for. And how do I handle these vague questions? All right, so I said, okay, this is how I want you to think about it, and this is where the ROI comes in. This is where I earn my money. You've got to determine what the most important skills are, what is actually truly required. So we went back. Now, I would say in this case that you need large-scale project management experience for IT solutions. If you have some knowledge of human capital solutions, that's good too. Global is important, especially because for somebody who's working in the US, when you start working globally, whether in Asia or anywhere, doesn't make any difference. The cultures are different. You need to understand what those cultural differences are, because that is going to permeate through the way in which you run the project, the way in which you interact with them, and all that good stuff. And every country's got different standards. It's important that you have that. So in my opinion, she had all that. She did. She really did. She had to get her primary story in order. So when I say primary story, if you are a marketer and you're going to digital marketing, you're going to go in and you're going to interview. If you are a project manager and you go in and you're going to interview. If you're a technologist and you're going to go in and interview, you can run an entire interview on one story. You need one bread and butter story that is analogous to what it is they do. Now you might say, well, Andy, hang on, I haven't done exactly what I'm going over there to do. Number one, that's the point. I want to learn. Yeah, it is. But you got to sell yourself into there first. And with your one story, they're going to notice that what you're telling them is just like what they need you to do. That's the big deal part. Except that she didn't have a super clean story because she didn't have anything that looked exactly like what they were looking for. And then the offshoots are sub-stories. So we have to get them in order, and it's a lot less for you to remember. And then how do you harden up the soft questions? And if you have to harden up the soft questions, like when they say things to me like, well, how would you handle the backlog? You need to say, okay, I would handle the backlog based on what's in the backlog. So in the backlog could be, right, new enhancements, version 2, right, bug fixes, wish list stuff, and so on. And so here's how I would do that. Are you talking about, if you want to talk about a backlog, then we're going to talk maintenance. If you want to talk about future enhancements, we're going to talk about new rollouts. So basically she's going to harden it up so she knows where to go with the response, and she knows all the variations of what it could be, and you have to anticipate that because anybody who was experienced enough would know that. And so you immediately go back and you harden it up for them. So these are the things that we needed to work on with her. And then here's what she had. I said, now when I get into one-on-one interviews, one-on-one coaching sessions with people, I look at their job descriptions. This is for interview prep when I prep somebody. And I look at so I had an advanced look at what she sent me. I looked at it and I knew exactly what she needed. I didn't know what she had other than the resume I was looking at. So when she and I got together, I said to her, okay, what do you have related to human capital management, large project implementations, global, SaaS, right? I ticked it off for her. What's the story? She said, well, I maintain the HCM system now. Okay, that's not close enough. You maintain it, that's fine. That checks off the knowledge of the functions. She says, well, I implemented this I implemented this reference checking system that we needed to put in place because we had no way to handle reference checking, manage reference checking, and all that good stuff. And I said, okay, how long was it? She says, 2 months. I said, okay, that's not long enough. What else do you have? She said, well, I did this almost year long, I think it was, security project where we had some issues with hundreds of users that were using the a system, and this was a security-based approach. I think we needed to make sure we were HIPAA compliant, who had access to what, and it was a fairly complicated solution. How long did it take? How many resources were there? So, okay. Now, when I'm working with you, I can say to you, okay, what do you got? And if that doesn't fit, I can start piecing together and asking you, okay, what else? She says, well, I got one of these. I said, give me that, right? Because we're going to take all this together and we're going to build you a story where you could run the whole interview and you can score all the points you need to off one story and the additional offshoots that you need to include in the storytelling to make it sound like one response. That's your goal. I only need one response. Okay, so here's what I want to share with you. Now, why just one response? Well, it doesn't matter what their question is, right? How have you done this before? Do you have these skills? What makes you unique? Tell me about a similar project. These are all the same question. Tell me about that project there or this project there. Have you implemented an HCM solution before from scratch? No, she hadn't, right? Have you implemented full life? All of these questions are all the same question in the interview. They all have the same response, which is why she doesn't need to package 7 different responses. She needed one response that she knew how to tell really well. Okay? And so this is what I want to teach you guys. I'm constantly looking for new ways to illustrate how to tell stories. Do I have any book writers out there, novelists in particular, or short story writers? Raise your hand if I do. There's different ways to tell a story. The novelists will know these. I'm an author and I obsess over writing, so these are pretty apparent to me. And when you are telling a story, it's all about the narrative that you're telling. And there's different ways to tell a narrative to elicit different reactions, emotions, actions, and whatever your goal is for whoever's reading it or hearing it from you. There's linear storytelling. Now, linear storytelling is just like it sounds. It starts in the beginning, it goes to the next step, the next step, the next step, and everything, and all the way from A to Z, and it all happens in time sequence. It's perfectly linear, okay? So it starts and it finishes, all right? That's it. Now, some of you can tell stories that way, right? I did this project, I started here, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this, boom, linear. Okay, that's what a lot of you do. And you're afraid to go off track because you don't want to go all over the place. Except that the best way to tell a story is to fracture it. Now, nonlinear storytelling or nonlinear writing, you've probably seen it, watched it in movies, read it in novels, but a nonlinear story is a story that jumps time or has insertions from other places or has flashbacks, which are different, but other ways where you're using information to illustrate your point. So you've seen a movie, right, where you see the movie going and then what happens? Oh, 17 years earlier, they're flashing back to what was happening to the character or in the story or whatever it is. Sometimes it jumps forward, sometimes it jumps back, sometimes it jumps out. Okay, that's fracturing a story because you need something that happened at a different moment in time to make a point. Or in this case, if it's entertainment, they're just trying to get better emotion out of you. So that's called fracturing. Then there's other things where you can frame a story. This is different than the priming and framing I teach you from moving a person's emotional state and getting them to view something how you want them to view it. Framing a story from a narrative standpoint is a story within a story. So all this stuff is going on, and the story is I'm sitting around and I'm talking with my buddies, and then the story within the story is I'm telling them a story about something else, kind of thing. So there's a story within a story, or there's another thing that I would call, and I didn't have a proper name for this, but it's really like a curation. So like you Frankenstein it. So you take different pieces of different stories and you curate them together to make it sound like one story. Do you know that I do this to you almost every talk? Right? What did I do yesterday? I gave you 6 criterion points in a row. What did I do? I pulled 3 different stories from 3 different people that happened 3 different moments in time. And so I curated what I need to illustrate the point I was making in the talk, which I was giving to you in a linear fashion, except from a time perspective, I had to go back in time and grab examples to illustrate the point I needed to make to you right at that moment. Okay, so these are different ways for you to assemble your interview stories. Okay, so now what I want to basically give you an example of what I mean, so you have an understanding of what Olivia was doing. So she said to me, or she asked, should I, which story should I use? And now, remember yesterday when I said, well, relevancy is better than recency, except she had some relevancy that she was maintaining a system with HCM. She also had a recent story where she did that 8-week implementation, except complexity trumps both of these if you can check off most of the skill sets that the employer needs. So complexity in her story about the security and the user permissions and the user base to get them dialed in is going to trump everything. And so I had to teach her how to fracture that story to get all the elements that she needed to show them that she had all the requirements that they needed. They just didn't all fit nicely into one project. So what we did was I said to her, all right, I want you to go with the more complicated project that was bigger. It was global, so that's good. It is somewhat related because there were some security issues, some HIPAA issues, some other things that you were overcoming. Okay, so context, approach, we're going to fracture the approach, and then we're going to tell them about what happened. So, context. You don't just start with, I have this story, it's about security, right? You start with what? There was this problem. We were out of compliance with HIPAA laws. We had all of these users. We didn't have the proper security settings. We didn't have the proper user roles. We had people with access to places. We were violating these laws. We had all kinds of right. Okay, that's the content. There's a real problem here. Okay, so this needs to be implemented. So I was put in charge. Now, when I was put in charge, a significant portion of this project was thinking about what the role were going to be, how to assemble it. We had to match it with the laws and all this other stuff. Great. Except that that's not exactly what you're going to do when you implement this HCM, this more of an operational system. So that's okay. So you give them the context, you tell them what you did, you give them the whole year and all the stages. So she did that. Then when you go into the body, when you get into the approach, here and you take them through the steps, you go linear, you say, I did this first, then I did this second. And when I got to the second piece, there was this requirements phase that we had to go through. Now you're going to give them the detail, and then you're going to fracture the story, and you're going to tell them how they would have to do this in their environment for exactly what they need to do and why you know that to be the case. So here's what I did. But this is analogous to, take them to the future, in your environment, when you implement an HCM system, the requirements gathering is going to be a little different because, and I know that because, jump back in time, because when I'm working in a maintenance mode and we do these mini cycles, this is the way we have to do it, and this is the most effective way. So that's what we would do in the future. That's how you fracture a story. Okay, then you keep going. So just so you understand, that's what you would have to look forward to if I was to run this project. I took them into the future, I brought them back to the present in the story. And then she went on, finishes it out. So when we test it, most of this is going to be tested this way, except that when we test your system, there's going to need to be more elegant script writing. We're going to need to use a tool. We're going to, boom. Why do you know that? Because every time we do something this complicated where there's a lot of customization to the system, we have to do it this way. That wasn't part of her story. She's telling them that's what they're going to have to do. Well, all of a sudden, this sounds like somebody who has a methodology and is pulling all the pieces. You know, there was this time where I encountered this problem. I didn't encounter this. You'll encounter this problem. I didn't encounter this problem. But back in 1999, this happened. Kind of thing. So that's fracturing the story to make it sound like one story. You are not running off at the mouth because you're doing it very quickly. You're just inserting points for a couple of reasons. Number one, you're giving them a better illustration of what their life is likely to be like when they take the project on. You're giving them assurances that you know what to anticipate and how you would handle it. You're validating it with where in your life I Frankensteined it. I just pulled a piece, I pulled the arm over from that and I attached it right there and I built it, and it all sounds cohesive because what's the goal of your story? To show them that you know what you're doing and the value you're going to contribute and why you're qualified to do it. Right? So that's how she had to piece it together. Who's tracking with me? I know this sounds complicated, but when you think about it, there's steps to this, right? What is it that they want? What is it that I have? What's my most analogous story? How do I fill in the gaps inside the story I want to tell them or am likely to tell them? And how do I build it and make it one? And that's how you do that. And you think about it, and it's just 3 steps. And most of where you would fracture the story is in the approach. Well, I did this first, I did this second, I did this third. And then just take what you need and drop it into where it is because you need to push them into their environment, right? So you're not using the whole stop after the story's done and then do you have an exam? No, she knows what their problem is. She knows why they're interviewing her. She knows the system that she's going to need to implement. Well, we got that straight, right? She knows the system that they're going to need to implement. So I hope that helps you understand. So when you're looking at this linear, so like interview intervention, that's linear except what? When I fracture it, when I tell you stories. When I do things like there was this guy, his name was Michael, boom, 2007. There was this guy, his name was Andy, and in 2003, if somebody would have told him he's going to be a recruiter in 2004, he would have laughed you out of the room, right? Kind of thing. That's a fracture. Now, it's way better if you're telling entertaining stories, but you can use those techniques. I'm telling you, it's okay to pull things in from other stories when they are contextually important and you need them to sell yourself, and you're doing this for illustrative purposes. The goal for you is not to tell a story from A to Z. The goal for you is to get a job. The fastest way to do that is to make sure that they can see you have all the skills that you need. Okay? So, who's tracking with me? Linear, nonlinear, fractured, Frankenstein. If you hear any other career coach talking like this, you know they copied it from me. I have to keep making names and stuff up so that I can make sure that I'm out in front of everybody and that you guys are getting it first and best. Okay. I promised myself I was getting this done within an hour. It's 11:58, so I'm just stopping right now. You're done on this. Okay, so you got the goods here. If you enjoyed that, click the thumbs up.